Okay, it is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021, and this is for Science of Cooking. This is our final demo of semester one. So we made it halfway through the school year, and today we're going to be finishing off because we started our unit last week on food and the senses. We've been talking about all different things that affect the way that you perceive food, you know, taste, sound, smells, things like that. And when we talked about taste, we talked about umami, which we mentioned in last week's balsamic vinaigrette demo. Now, today's recipe is all about umami. It is a umami tomato sauce. So it is all about adding different layers of those savory flavors, the glutamate, that really give a nice mouthfeel. But also it's that layering and combination of flavors that really bring each other out as we go, okay? So we're gonna be starting off today with a little enamel pan here. I'll show you that. Okay, so this is a cast iron pan. It is pretty heavy duty, but you could use a metal saucepan. Try and use something that's stainless steel. Stay away from aluminum. We're using something as acidic as tomatoes. So that's why I have this one here that's enamel coated on the inside, right? So that doesn't have a chemical reaction to it. So this, you know, a pan that's probably at least 2 quarts in size, about a half gallon at least of sauce that would fit in there. That's the size pan that you want. And I've got a good wooden spoon. And I've got my burner set up over here. And we're going to start off with some olive oil in the pan. So the recipe that I gave you guys in Google Classroom, it's going to be with this video also, is that, you know, 1 to 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to start off with about a tablespoon of olive oil in the pan. And I'm not measuring it because I know when you do it enough. But if you're not very comfortable with that, measure it out using your spoons, okay? And then we're going to get that going on low heat in just a second, but I want to add something in that's going to start building our umami flavor base, and that is anchovies, okay? Don't snub your nose at anchovies, especially if you've never had them, okay? So these are the anchovies that I'm using today, right? They are in olive oil, salt added, okay? So the thing that's going to happen with the anchovy fillets, which you can see right here, okay, is that they're going to dissolve and that flavor is going to meld into the sauce. So this is going to give us a layer of saltiness and umami at the same time. So 3 to 4 of these, depending on their size, and these guys are a little on the small side, so I'm going to go with 4. Okay, like I said, don't be afraid of them. They're just going to dissolve and melt in. Anchovies are used in lots of authentic Italian, French cuisine. So don't be afraid of them. You can store these, wrap these up, keep them stored in the oil, and just put them, leftovers in your refrigerator, but make sure to keep them in that oil, okay, so they don't dry out. So we're gonna get this pan going on a low heat. I said I just want those fillets to dissolve out, right? So that's gonna be my first layer of flavor. It's gonna give me a great salt flavor to the sauce that's very mild, okay? So don't be afraid to use the anchovies. So what we're going to add next that's also umami is going to be our garlic. So we're going to do 3 cloves of garlic because this is an Italian sauce, right? We want to have that nice punch of garlic flavor, but also the aroma that goes with it, right? So we've got 3 good-sized cloves of garlic. You could use more if you want more garlic. And we're just going to smack them, right? So the sharp edge of our blade's away from us, right? Give them a good little whack. And then we'll take off our peels. So remember with the garlic also to trim off that root end of any dry spots. So we look for anything that's dried up, trim that off. We don't want that in our sauce. Okay. So just peel all our cloves. And we're going to just chop these up somewhat fine. They don't have to be perfect because they will work their way in the sauce. They'll cook down. So look for any of those rough, dry ends. Make sure to trim and toss those out so you don't use them in your sauce. Okay. So I've got my anchovies going on low to a medium heat. So we'll just check on that in a minute. All right. And we're just going to run the knife through these. A little dry spot. Get rid of that. Chopped up. Like I said, these are going to have some time to cook down. We want to make sure that when we put the garlic in, though, that you do keep an eye on it. You don't want to have the heat too high that the garlic burns, because what that'll do is it'll help it turn into a bitter flavor, and we don't want our sauce bitter. I'm just lowering the heat on this oil. So we put the garlic in. And I'm going to show you what the anchovies are looking like. So they just dissolve down. All right, so we got this chopped up nicely. Okay, so that's our 3 cloves of garlic that's going to be going into our sauce. So your onion, to thin it out a little bit, you should just kind of keep stirring your garlic and anchovies as we go here. With that blade, 45-degree angle, I'm going to come in and cut, but I don't want to cut all the way through my root, right? Now I'm going to cut some slits down this way. Remember, we did this at the beginning of the year, right? Towards the root, but I don't want to cut through. I want to keep this intact. So now when I slice this way, I get a nice small dice. You want to try and have it as even as possible so that your onions cook in the same amount of time. So about a half a cup of onion is plenty. Save the half for something else. Right now, this is going to go in with our garlic and our anchovies. Give it a good stir. I'm going to add about another teaspoon or so of olive oil to the pan. Right. So like I said, don't be shy about it. You know, if it starts to look a little too dry, add a little bit more in. You don't want to drown it in oil, but I want to make sure that this is not going to burn. So lots of aroma already, lots of layers of flavoring. And what we're looking for is we want our onions to get cooked through. We want them to be somewhat translucent. They start to look a little bit clear. Right? Even a little caramelized is fine. We just don't want them to burn. Now into this, I'm also going to add a little bit of seasoning. So we're going to add in a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. Same things a lot of you guys use to sprinkle on top of your pizza. Right? Now, if you like it spicier, like Fra Diavolo sauces and things, add more red pepper, right? But I would do a little bit at a time. Do it a 1/4 teaspoon at a time, so that way it's not too hot, right? And then we're going to add in some cracked black pepper, so about 10, 12-ish grinds. And that's going to help infuse some flavor and just a little bit of heat. Right? It's not going to make it a super spicy sauce. You're just going to have a hint of spice. If you add more crushed red pepper, it would definitely make it a lot spicier. So I'm going to show you guys this so you can see. It's not a see-through pan, right? So we're just letting those onions, our red pepper, the black pepper, garlic, our anchovies all cook down in that oil. Nice low heat, medium at most. Okay. Because this is a little gas unit, it does tend to get hot really fast, okay? Especially because this is a cast iron pan at its core. So our next thing I'm going to add is our tomatoes. We're waiting to get them ready while this is cooking down a little bit. We're going to be using a canned tomato, especially this time of year in the winter, right? This is great because fresh tomatoes, not always the best quality, right, in the winter seasons. So we're going to use a canned tomato, so San Marzano tomatoes. The whole tomatoes is what you're looking for, all right? So we're going to just dump these into our bowl here. And these are whole tomatoes, right? So they are a whole plum tomato, all right? So what we're going to do is we need to break these down a little bit. So we're going to hand crush them, okay? Make sure your hands are clean, which I've already washed a million times this morning. But we're just going to come in and hand crush them. Kind of tear them apart a little bit. All right. This is a good task to be wearing an apron for. Dark apron like I've got on now. Right? So we just crush those. When they say hand crushed, they mean hand crushed. Right? Don't be shy. It's a good thing for little kids to do. We've got different sized pieces and chunks. These will cook down some depending on how long you cook your sauce for. If you like it a little bit chunkier, leave them like this, which is what I like, right? So I've got some nice big pieces, but these will break down still a little bit as they cook. Right? Hands. So this is our tomato base. Now, tomatoes that come out of the can, the other thing to realize too is that depending on the brands and when they were picked and harvested, right, tomatoes flavor can change, okay? Sometimes they're a little bit more acidic, and sometimes they're a little bit sweeter. So depending on each individual can, you can add some sugar into this recipe to sweeten it if it needs it, which I will figure out after I taste it. Right? So always taste first before you just add stuff like that. So our mixture is cooked down, right? It's fairly translucent, okay? It will cook a little bit more with our tomatoes, which I'm going to add in right now. So I'm going to add in the whole can of tomatoes, crushed, juice and all. Go in nice and low to your pan when you're doing this so you're not splattering it in. We're going to get all that flavor in there, that yumminess. Like I said, we're just going to let this cook. Okay. So now this is the, our base of our sauce is being built, right? So it's a fair amount. This will definitely do, a full family meal. But it's a quick enough sauce you can do on a weeknight. It's not one of those Sunday sauces that you have to cook on the stove for 6 hours, right? 15, 20 minutes. You can let it simmer. Keep it on low on the side while you cook your pasta. You're good to go. Now, what we're also going to add into this is a little bit of unsalted butter, okay? Now, that's going to help add in some of that umami mouthfeel with the fat, but it's also going to give a creaminess to our sauce. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons, which I sliced off at the lines on the paper, right? I'm going to take our paper off, though. So 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. So one thing you'll notice, and we're just going to drop this right in here as our sauce is cooking down, is I didn't add any salt yet, right? We have salt in our anchovies, but we're also going to be adding in our next ingredient is Parmesan cheese, which can also be really salty. So if you need to add more salt, you're going to need to check that at the end of cooking and see then if you need to add more, okay? You don't want to over season, over salt, because you can't take it out, okay? So it's better to wait, let it do its thing. So if you don't have unsalted butter, you use salted butter, right? That would also change things. So that's why adding that, seasoning, that final check at the end is critical. All right. So we're going to be using some Parmesan cheese that's going to go directly into our sauce. And we're going to use a little bit to finish at the end as well. But this is a block Parmesan that you can pick up at the grocery store, right? Much better flavor when you freshly grate it versus anything you're ever going to get in one of those green top cans. Okay, in the pasta aisle. So you want to look in your cheese case, your specialty cheese cases. These, half a pound was about $3.50, right? And this will last in your fridge for quite a while as well. So I'm just using a little hand grater. You could use a box grater if that's what you have. And we want to get about a half a cup of finely grated Parmesan cheese. This is going to give us more umami, right? Because Parmesan cheese is high in glutamate. So it's going to add another layer of flavor, right, to our sauce. So about a half a cup is what we're looking for. Okay. So we're going to add a little bit on top to finish our sauce at the end. But we're going to add this straight in, okay? Just give them that butter finish melting down here. A little bit more heat. You want to be careful when you're cooking sauces too, not to have the heat too high because it will spit and splatter on everything. It's a big mess to clean up, plus you could get burnt. So we're going to add in our cheese. All right, like I said, we're going to put the whole thing in. Cheese to the side here. And this is when you want to let that kind of meld in and dissolve, and then give a taste test to see if it's going to need more salt, right? Like I said, because there's salt from the anchovies. There could be salt if that's the kind of butter you're using. And there's definitely salt in that salty flavor in your Parmesan cheese, right? And that can change too by different varieties, right? Different brands. So let that go for a second. Grab a spoon. is that you always want to taste test your food, right? You don't want to just put something on the plate and then it doesn't taste good, right? So grab a little tasting spoon, see where we're at. It's got good flavor. I notice these tomatoes are a little bit acidic. So we are going to add in just a little bit of brown sugar, right? We don't want to add in a lot, just a little bit to help balance out that acidity in the tomatoes. So we're going to do 1 tablespoon of light brown sugar. You could use white sugar. I find the brown sugar gives another layer depth of flavor. So we're going to do a tablespoon of that. We're going to let that melt in. That should be plenty. But we're going to double check and taste it again, right? We want to make sure that our sauce tastes good. And then we'll see if it needs more salt, right? So you want to balance out the acidity in the tomatoes first before you gauge the salt, because that's kind of all I picked up for flavor. Grab my spoon. That's good. Does need a little bit of salt. So I'm going to add in about a teaspoon's worth of salt. And that'll be plenty. And I'm just using a little kosher salt here. Add that in. And that'll be good. So I'm just letting this cook down, reduce down some of that liquid. We're going to talk about the pasta. All right. So there's our sauce there. We're just going to let that simmer on low, gently bubble. Now, I cooked the pasta before. So when you look at your recipe, it talks about cooking your pasta first. So you can get your sauce going, keep that on low, cook your pasta. Either way is fine, right? So what I made here earlier this morning is a campanelle, right? These are a little fluted pasta shapes. These are great for these kind of sauces, simple marinaras and things like that, because the sauce will soak right down inside those little tubes, okay? So this pasta was already cooked to al dente, which means it's a little bit firm. So you want to stop it before it gets cooked too soft, because we're going to finish this in the sauce. I also saved some of the pasta water, right? So this is the water that it was boiling in. So when I put this big pot of water on this morning, I put in about a gallon of water for a whole pound, a tablespoon of salt. So don't skimp on the salt, because that's going to season your pasta as it cooks. And then save some of your pasta water, because this is already seasoned, right? And it contains a lot of starch. So this will help control the thickness and adjust the consistency of our sauce, right? You won't get that with just straight up water. Right? Now, to be classic, right, in our presentation, you know, if you're going and having an Italian meal and things, the sauce would never be served just kind of poured on top of your pasta. It'd always be coated and tossed together, right, to finish it off. That's why you cook your pasta al dente and you finish it in the sauce, so it'll soak up those flavors, okay? So I don't want to cook a whole cabbage at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this pan off the heat. We've got it here so you can see our sauce. It's looking good, bubbling down. Right, it's got a beautiful color to it, slightly pinkish color from that butter, that creaminess. Right, and what we're going to do is do a smaller pan of pasta. So I'm going to take some of my sauce, a good ladleful, into my little saucepan here. And then I'm going to add the pasta right into this. So you could do this and keep these two things separate and heat them that way. Because the problem is when you have leftover pasta is that it dries out, right? The pasta soaks up all the liquid and you end up with leftover dry pasta. So if you keep them separated, you won't have that problem. So we're going to move this back here to the stove. Grab our wooden spoon. So we've got our little saute pan here. We want to coat this really well. We want to let that pasta, and so the pasta was kind of lukewarm, so it'll take it a minute to heat up. And we want it to soak up all that juice from our sauce, right? All those layers of flavor, parmesan and things. And I'm going to add a little pasta water into it. About a tablespoon's worth for size, for single serving size. So it's recommended to save at least a half a cup of pasta water whenever you make, you know, a sauce like this. So that way you can control it, the consistency. Just gonna let that thicken up just a little bit. Finish heating up while we get our plate. Now to finish this off, we are going to add a little bit more cheese and also a little balsamic vinegar, just a little bit for another layer of umami to finish this off. It'll give it a little different acidity at the end, a little bit of brightness and flavor. Hot. You want cold pasta. Good sizzle on it. So it's always about a minute or two to finish off a pasta dish. Nice and hot and steamy. Okay. So now we're going to plate this up. So we've got our dinner plate here. Ingredients. So to finish this off, I'm going to put a little bit of extra Parmesan cheese on here. For another hit of umami. I'm going to do just a little bit of balsamic vinegar. So just a drizzle, maybe a half a teaspoon's worth, not too much. You don't want to overpower it, but just splash a little bit on at the end. I said that'll just give you a little bit of extra flavor burst. And we're going to finish this with a little bit of parsley, right? Because we need a little bit of green to balance out our color. Just a little bit of parsley on the plate. You can smell all the flavors, right? All melded together. And there's your umami tomato sauce, right? It's beautiful. It's very fragrant, very aromatic, right? You've got all these different hits of umami through there. Parmesan cheese, anchovies, the tomatoes themselves, the garlic. So when you put it all together, but you want to make sure that all your flavors balance and meld together, right? So they all complement each other. Always check your seasoning at the end, especially if you let it cook down more. Let it cook down first, then adjust your seasoning after it's thickened up, because you don't want it to be, like I said, too salty or things. And if you want it a little bit on the spicier side, add some more crushed red pepper. Okay, so that is your umami tomato sauce. So hopefully something you guys can try at home. Quick weeknight meal.